All right, on our phone now, we are joined by Chris Mallick. The new movie, Middlemen, sounds like it's going to be really good. And, Chris, we appreciate the visit today. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on.
Well, thank you for coming on here with us. It's a very interesting project. Exactly what was it about this that drew you to it?
Well, this Middleman is based on a true story, and it happens to be a portion of my business career that is sort of the film focuses on Luke Wilson's character playing the part that portrays, I guess, a bit of my business career,
right, and
some of the experiences I had. So I guess it was, personal interest, obviously, and fairly cathartic in telling a story, and then putting it together made my life a lot more interesting on the big screen than it is in my mind. So we were really fortunate to have Luke Wilson attached to the project and lead the cast in this.
All right, so as you said, it's based on your experiences. This is kind of your baby too. You're one of the big producers of the film. Did you help write it as well? Were you like one of the co-writers?
Well, there's two writers, George Gallo and Andy Weiss. George Gallo wrote Midnight Run and 29th Street and Bad Boys and directed a number of films. And Andy Weiss, who's a great writer out here in L.A., wrote a bunch of comedies, a lot of entourage writing. They wrote the script a bit under my direction. They took it to places I could never get it to, and then we all collaborated towards the end on a polish and developing the script a little bit further to make it a bit more cinematic. So in that respect, I had a hand in the script, but the credit really goes to George Gallo and Andy Weiss.
All right, let's get to the crux of the matter here. This all takes place in the mid to late 90s at the start of the Internet, and it focuses on the advent of Internet porn, correct?
That's correct. The film starts in 95 and goes, actually flashes back and forward a number of times, but basically from the period of 88 to 2004. It skips over about a 5-year period, but the basis of the film is 1995 through 1998 and how e-commerce really was created. And the true story of how you're able to buy things online is based on the fact that people wanted to buy porn online or wanted it online. People wanted to put it up online. There was no way to pay for it. One of the very first guys that did this, that actually put pictures up online, was asking people just, hey, please mail me a check or cash, and people were actually doing it. So until these guys came along, you couldn't really buy anything online with a credit card, and they developed that technology and that software, which is used today, and everything you do online in terms of e-commerce.
So at what point in the phenomena of this online development of e-commerce and the idea of getting, porn on the Internet and all that, did you jump into this fray? Were you on the very cutting edge of this, or had it been going on for, a couple of years or so before you got in on it? Or
Yeah, it had been starting, and the business was a little like, wildcat oil well drilling. It was not really very organized, and people started and were trying to do different things, but the guys that I ended up being in business with actually started it and needed someone to come in and straighten out some business problems that they had, and that's what I was doing at the time. And it was started innocently enough as, let me help you straighten out your business, to this is really an incredible business opportunity, to this can be an industry. And so I stuck with it for about 6 years and developed it further. So I wasn't on the bleeding edge, but I would say I was on the cutting edge of it.
All right, and so these guys went from the Internet porn guys, the guys who developed the software and just had the idea, basically, which I can't believe. There had to be a million people that thought of this. I guess these guys were the first ones to actually put it into action. But once you got involved, what kind of money were these guys making right out of the chute?
Well, we would charge a percentage. What our company did was we were the middlemen between the consumer and the producer. And so much like you go to a movie theater and buy a ticket, the movie theater owner doesn't make the movie, and he's not going to see the movie. He's just an agent for sale, and that's what we did. And we got a percentage of every sale that we made, and those percentages ranged from 10 to 15%. At the height of the business, we were doing about $1.3 billion a year in credit card billing, and about $300 million a year in check processing.
So these guys went from not having a pot to pee in, basically, to being close to billionaires?
Yeah, from not having cars and riding bikes and rooming in apartments in dodgy sort of areas to multi-millionaires. Yeah.
And this all happened right here in our area?
No, Chris, you were here. You were here. They
all right, where did you have to go to do this?
I came to L.A. I born and raised in Dallas-Fort Worth.
Okay, all right.
And in New York, living in New York, and then back and forth in L.A. doing business. And this business was in L.A., and that's where I came to run the company.
Where'd you go to high school?
I went to Country Day in Fort Worth.
Okay. Okay, cool. So your whole family I've talked to a couple people that know you, and your whole family are Country Day kids, basically?
Yeah, all of my side of the family, all my brothers and sisters, we all went to Country Day. My kids go to St. Mark's in Dallas. I have 4 boys, and they all go to St. Mark's. Well, the eldest one just graduated and is going to Vanderbilt this year. All
right, so which leads me to the next question. Suddenly you are involved, 15 years ago in a very profitable business, but at the same time an extremely seedy operation, if some people look at it. How did that affect the family?
Well, you can only say so many times, look, I don't make the stuff. I don't buy the stuff. I'm just, I'm like the hotel chains. If you go to Marriott or Hyatt or Hilton and you check into a room and you buy an adult film, does that make Marriott or Hilton
right.
or Hyatt a pornographer? I'm in the same position they were, but it was a very difficult thing to get people to really understand that I was just really truly a middleman. But the people we were dealing with, at the end of the day, it's, well, you're a pornographer. So that made it very tough, and I was forever trying to explain that away, sometimes with success and sometimes without. So it did create difficulties, and it does create a misperception of what you do and who you are, based on the fact that you're trying to provide for your family, which is what I was doing at the time.
Was it pretty widely known in the circles that you traveled in at the time, or did you try to keep it on the down low, or just how did you try to negotiate all that?
No, everyone knew what I did and the company I ran, and it wasn't anything I was ashamed of, so I didn't hide it. When my mother would ask, my mother asked, what are you doing now? I would say things like, well, I'm, processing credit cards on the Internet, which is, I didn't go into great excruciating detail about what type of transactions I was processing. So I gave her a little installment of the truth. But
right.
Saving except for Mom, I was pretty dead honest with everybody.
That's always best to do with mothers.
I think so.
This is Chris Mallick. He is one of the executive producers of the new film Middlemen, starring Luke Wilson, which comes out this Friday. It's basically based on partially your life. And how long did it take you? You say this is based on, it's essentially a 5-year window. You're out of that business now. You're in the business of making films. How long did you last? When did you get out of it, and what was the reasoning behind getting out of it?
I was out of it in 2004 or 2005, and it was just too crazy. It was too many changes and too many regulations were coming, and it ceased to be entrepreneurial. And after you do this 5 or 6 years, you're kind of burned out because the pace is just was frenetic for the first 3 years. 4th year, it got a little bit more tolerable, but by the time the 5th year came around, I thought, well, I'm getting too old and too rich to be messing with this every day. And so I, without sounding arrogant, I just said, okay, enough is enough, and I'll move on, and actually opened another Internet business that I bought from my former partners, and I continue to run that today, but my main business is film production.
All right, that's how you got out of the business. Let's go back to when you got into it. When you made that first airplane ride out to Los Angeles, what were your thoughts on just how big this was going to be? Did you really think, I might be sitting on something that's really going to blow up here, or did you have more modest expectations, or what were you thinking at that time?
Well, the very first meeting I had was basically about what the problems were and how I could straighten those out. And as I became more familiar with it over the course of the first couple of days, it really did seem like the gold rush to me. It seemed like this is one of those rare opportunities. And at the time, I knew nothing about the Internet. I mean, I knew there was an Internet. I knew there was email, but I didn't have a clue about really how to take advantage of that. And I saw what these guys were doing, and once you're immersed in something just for a couple of days, it was so apparent to me that this was the gold rush and an opportunity of the likes of which I may never see again in my lifetime. So I stayed on it for that reason, because I did see a future in it. And the idea was is that this engine could bill for anything. It didn't have